Our speaker today is the most amazing Joyce Bulifant. I remember her from her recurring role on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, where she was Marie Slaughter. But she was also on Password and Hollywood Squares. And I mean, she was a very, very familiar face back in the day. And she's led an amazing life with lots and lots of adventures. So she said we would need a hook to get her off today because she could go on, but we hope you go on and on and on. Here you go.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I started to say this morning when we were getting lost and driving all over, my co-pilot here, who came down and I said, 6:30, we have to be there 6:30. But I was going to say, you're very lucky to have me here today. I mean, I'm very lucky to be here today. My life has been extraordinary, I must say. I wrote my book and I started it 24 years ago. But what you have to know, my secret is, well, I'm blonde, I'm dyslexic, and I'm deaf. So be kind to me. I mean, it's been amazing getting through life these last years with no hearing in my right ear and a hearing aid in this ear and some eye operations and things like that. But my beginnings were as a child. My mother and father were divorced when I was a little girl. And my mother was very proud and wouldn't take any financial assistance. So I was in an orphanage for a while. And then I was in foster homes. And I used to do things like not go to school. Once I lived with my mother in a garage for a short time in Florida, and I remember we had to wear shower caps because we had flying cockroaches or something. It was kind of awful. But I was in second grade then, and I just didn't like school because I wasn't good at it. And so I would go down to the boardwalk in the morning and take my lunch money my mother had given me before she went to work. And I would go on all the rides, and I'd have candied apples for breakfast. And when I ran out of money, I had no qualms asking complete strangers, could I have a dime? I ran out of money and I want to go on the roller coaster. And I guess, therefore, I had to go to foster care when my mother found out I was not going to school. So that was all interesting. And people have said to me, how did you survive all that? And it was a deep, deep faith. But also, I loved entertaining the other little children. I was 7 and 8 at that time. And I loved putting on shows for the other little children. I'd put up an army blanket and flashlights for footlights. And that's when I decided, it made them so happy. And it made me so happy entertaining them. That's when I decided I want to be an actress. And also, from time to time, I would get to go to a movie. And even though Margaret O'Brien ate her spinach and things like that, I still wanted to be like her. And Shirley Temple and those people. Do you remember, I'm so old that nobody knows, who's Shirley Temple and Margaret O'Brien? But I wanted to, I wanted to get lost. When I went to the movies and I would see them, and they would make me feel so good, I thought, oh, if I could ever do that, that would make me so happy. And in third grade, I got to live with my mother again, and there was an orphanage nearby. And I used to take my comic books and chewing gum and things, and I'd go over and give it to the children. And they would just say, thanks, or something. And I thought, if I were one of those big stars up on stage and I gave them that, that would really make them happy. And it had always been my desire as a little girl, kind of, to be an actress, to try to bring a little joy that actors brought to me, to other people. And I've been so lucky in my work. I have always worked from the time Well, when I was 14, I went into summer stock, and I was the youngest person there. They had college students who did all the grunt work, but I cleaned the toilets, I got coffee for the stars. I would stand in the back of the theater with a plumber's stick in my hand going, someday it'll be me up there. And then I also did props and lighting and learned every bit of the background of theater, which I love doing theater. And one time, Everett Horton, does anybody remember him? He was a fractured flicker, it's hard to say. He came and we had what they call the star system. So we would do a different play every week and a different star would come in. This was at the Grove Theater in New Angola, Pennsylvania, where Kirk Douglas started. It's now a Catholic church, what can I tell you? Anyway, I was doing props that week, and there was a scene in the play where he's with a group of gentlemen, and they're all in their tuxedos having dinner, and I got to be the maid a lot too. That was great. And I bring out drinks, and Mr. Horton said to me, Joyce, do you mind, dear, by the time you've done all of the props and everything, there are flies in there, and it's warm, and we have to drink it down. Could you please put the drinks in the refrigerator so they'll be at least chilled and there won't be flies? And yes, sir, I would be happy to do that. So it was Sunday matinee, and I went to use the food coloring for the wine. And the red stuff was gone. There was no purple. There was nothing, no food coloring I could make the wine. At the time, I was only 14, so I didn't know that you could have white wine. I didn't know that much about wine. And I got panicky, and I went out to the prop shop and started climbing around to see if I could find some food coloring. And when I moved something, this whole thing of Jell-O hit me in the head, and I went, oh, it was purple Jell-O. And so that's perfect. So I got to the theater and put a little bit of the Jell-O in each glass and put it in the refrigerator. Wasn't that brilliant? And then I came out as the maid, and each of the gentlemen took their glass, and Everett Horton made a toast to a very serious moment in the play, and they all cleaned glass, and they went like this, and a blob hit them right in the face. So Everett Horton just tied me to a tree out in front of the theater to teach me a lesson. I also burned a hole in his silk pajamas. I had to iron them. But, oh, well, that was a great experience. For 3 years, I worked in summer stock, and I got my equity card. And again, I was having trouble in school, and I had a boyfriend named James MacArthur, whose mother happened to be Helen Hayes, but I didn't know anything about theater. I just knew movie stars. And he invited me. My mother had an apartment in New York, and sometimes I'd go stay with her from boarding school. And he invited me to go to the theater to see his mother in a play. And I thought, oh, well, this is interesting. I didn't know she did that kind of thing, you know. And we're sitting in the third row at the New York Center City Theater. And all of a sudden, the curtain came up, and Helen was knitting in the scene. And she looked out, and she looked right at Jimmy and me, and she winked. And I thought, oh, my Lord, she is not in character. This is going to be awful. I mean, Jimmy's going to be so embarrassed. This is terrible. I mean, she doesn't know what she's doing. I, having spent 3 years in theater, knew exactly that you don't do things, you get into character. And this is terrible. But after a few minutes, I just got totally engrossed in her performance and the play, which was wonderful. And afterwards, we went backstage, and in her dressing room was Lillian Gish and Catherine Cornell and Laurence Olivier, and all these people were going up to her, Ruth Gordon, and they were all rushing, oh, Helen, darling, you were marvelous. Oh, what a performance, you know. And I pushed through everybody, and I gave her a hug, and I said, you know what? You were good. You know? We became incredibly close, And she had lost her daughter Mary when she was 19 to polio. And she'd sometimes say when we were traveling, she took me on my first trip to Europe, which was, I always thought it was going to be like that when I went to Europe. The band would meet me and the roses would come, but it was a wonderful first trip. And there was a bond between us that it's hard to explain. And when she did say about Jimmy, when we became engaged, Jimmy gave me to his mother for Mother's Day. It was very sweet. But she wasn't all that thrilled. There was a moment we came back on the ship from Italy, and Jim and I were engaged, and we were going to be married. And it was a strange crossing, and when we said goodbye that day, there was a kind of a tension, I can't even, I wouldn't know how to describe the word that was between us. But before that, when we became engaged, and I was staying in Nyack in the guest room, and she came in the morning with a breakfast tray, and she put it down, she sat on the edge of the bed, and she took my hand, and she said, "I don't think that you should marry Jimmy. He's not good enough for you." Well, I just thought that was the worst thing I ever could hear a mother say about her son. And my problem is that my ego is so big, oh boy, is it ever. I thought, if I loved him, obviously his mother doesn't love him the way I think she should, and if I love him, then he's going to be okay, because I knew he drank a little bit, but I knew he drank because he was sad. And if I love him, he's going to be fine. Wrong. And Helen kept saying things that were negative about Jimmy all along. And I didn't understand it until I was writing my book, and I do a show called Remembering Helen Hayes with Love. And it's all about our relationship with pictures and movies and letters that she's written. And I love doing it. And I was telling the editor of my book, I said, I don't have that. I don't have that in the show, what I wrote in the book. And she said, "What?" She said, "Do you know how important that is, that moment?" And I said, "Well, it was at the time, but it makes her seem so bad." And she wasn't bad, And she said, "But this is so important. And you know why she was doing that and saying bad things?" And I said, "Yes, she was trying to protect me. She loved me, and she was trying to protect me. And I didn't get it till that moment. And when I do the play, that's one of the real aha moments. And I think it's been that way. I'm sort of off my career, but it was part of my life. But I realized that each husband, that they were sad. And my big ego said, if I love them, they'll be just fine, which is very codependent. And I had to learn about codependency. I even went away after the fourth marriage. I put myself away in a rehab with addicts, and my addiction was to helping people and losing myself while helping someone else. And that I don't think a whole lot's been written about codependency, and that kind of weaves through my book. And the name of my book at the beginning was called Home Sweet Home, Where Is It? Because I have lived in about 75 houses. And yesterday, before we came here, I was making an offer on another house. And I have a stepson who calls me and he says, "I know we're invited to dinner tonight, but where are you living?" It's just been that way. I don't know if it has something to do with my early years of having to move from place to place. It might. But the book was called Home Sweet Home, Where Is It? Until I was talking to a local Newport Beach person, Bruce Cook, who's a friend of mine. And Bruce, he called me one day and he said, "I've got the title for your book." And I said, "What?" And he told me, and I said, "Oh, Bruce, that's disgusting. That's terrible." He said, "That should be the title." And I said, "No, no, I'd never do that." And then I started thinking about it. Yeah, but it might sell books. So it's now called My Four Hollywood Husbands. I don't talk about the other one I told you. He was a sociopath. But that's when I got smart, finally. I mean, the other marriages were 9 years, 7 years, almost 20 years, and then the sociopath, 2 months. I mean, that was learning something, right? At last. And then my husband, the love of my life, our love story weaves through the book. I met him in 1962, Roger Perry, and we did a show together, General Electric Theater, and John Forsythe was one of the producers. And I was very unhappy at that time. Jim was drinking and womanizing, and I met this handsome, striking, wonderful young man, and he had a little boy a year older than my son Charlie, and we had them to the set one day for a picnic, and he was such a good father. He was so loving and kind, and I kept thinking, oh my gosh, I really like this man. Oh dear, this is not good. I'm married. And I thought, oh, it's just the character he's playing. You know, he's playing a father and a wonderful, loving young husband, and it's not anything else. And then we go and watch the dailies, and John Forsythe would say, I have never seen such chemistry between two people on stage. And I said, please don't say that. Don't say that. But it was there and unspoken for so many years. That was 1962. Then we dated in 1967 for a year, then he broke up with me. He wanted to it was when everybody was getting married and living together and having children, and he just wanted to move in and not be married. And I said, oh, I don't do that. I have 2 little children, and I don't do that. And so that went away. But then in 2000, all of it, we were like ships passing in the night. And in 2000, he was divorced. He'd been married 25 years, and I had been married, and I was now not married. No, actually, I'd married the sociopath. It's hard to keep track, you know? It's so embarrassing. Anyway, it really is. But I tried, you know, I really did. They all were alcoholics, and I really thought I could help them. Mariette Hartley, who did Nanny and the Professor, with Carol's husband, wrote. She gave me a book one day. This was on only husband number 2, but it takes a while to get the lesson. And the book was called The Co-Alcoholic. And I mean, each page was, oh, this is a story about Joyce Bulifant. Oh, that's Joyce Bulifant's story. And I closed the book and said, that's me. And that's when I asked the second husband that he needed help, and I was feeding into the alcoholism. And this is what I had to learn. And when I did put myself away after the sociopath to learn, I had to write a letter forgiving myself. That was the hardest thing I ever had to do, and read it to my group. And because the idea that I'd put my children through all that was really hard. So, you know, you go through these things, and I have to say, as a little girl, in the orphanages, or even the year that I lived with my mother in 3rd grade, I would leave school and she wouldn't be home at the end of school, and I would go to churches, any church, any synagogue, right on the way home from school. I'd have a whole lot of them picked out, and I would just sit there quietly. And I felt that I did have, I mean, every child should have one person they trust, no matter who it is or whom it is. It could be the bank teller or somebody at the grocery store, but one person that they can trust. And I felt that when I sat in church, I felt very loved from a higher power. And it got me through so much. And in my career, the major disappointment when I had 3 little children at that time, I think I did, I was cast as Mrs. Brady in the Brady Bunch. And for 2 weeks, a limousine pulled up and we went shopping for my wardrobe. It was very exciting. They wanted me to lose 5 pounds, so I went where all the movie stars go and get beaten up by a lady named Louise Long. She beat you up, and then she put these electric things on you, and you could only eat scrambled eggs and tomatoes. That was it. But I did lose 5 pounds, but I was like this every walk. But anyway, the limousine would come and we'd go to all the fine stores, I Magnin, all the different wonderful stores, and pick out these great clothes. And then the little girls were all chosen and did screen tests with me to look like me. And Friday, we were going to start shooting on Monday. Friday, Sherwood Schwartz, the producer, and gosh, I can't remember the director, they came to the wardrobe department and they were sitting on a little settee. I mean, it's just like yesterday. And I walked out and I said, well, this is the dress she wears in the garden wedding. And they went, and I went back and I thought, that's funny, a reaction. Then I came and I said, and this is the going away suit that she wears after the wedding to go on her honeymoon. And they were just going, and usually they always say, oh, do you have another color? What about a scarf? What about different earrings? You have like shoes? They always never go. So the third outfit, I came back and I said, is something wrong? And Sherwood Schwartz said, sit down, Joyce. And I sat down. He said, we have a problem. I said, what? And I mean, had no idea. And he said, well, Marty Starger in New York with ABC, and they have the final say on everything. At the last minute, Florence Henderson has become available, and they want Florence. But we want you, and we're fighting for you, because if you do it, it'll be like the Lucy show. If Florence does it, it's going to be like the Donna Reed show, and we've written it with you having all the funny lines. And the housekeeper's the straight person. We're going to have to recast everything over the weekend. But we just want you to know that we are really fighting for you. And I had signed a 7-year contract. And I said, okay. Okay. And I went home. And later that night, he didn't call. Sherwood came to the house. And he sat down, and he was practically in tears. I mean, he had to change everything around in a few days. And he said, we didn't win, and I'm so upset. But I'm telling you, the next show I do, you're going to be in it. And I was, which was very sweet. And I didn't get any money with my 7-year contract, but they very appropriately gave me a gift of the going away suit. What could be more appropriate, right? And Sherwood would come by the house in the evening and go, it's just not what we wanted. But as we all know, Florence is a dear, wonderful lady, and the show was a big success. And I always truly believe that everything happens for a reason. I just really have to believe that. And besides, I got married to husband number 3, and had 8 children, so I had my own real live Brady Bunch. And that was great. That was to William Asher. He was producer and director. He did a lot of the I Love Lucy shows and created Bewitched. He was married to Elizabeth Montgomery, and I got to have those children as my own. I adore them all. We're like the United Nations of family. We have every color, we've got gay, we've got straight, we've got up and down, I don't know what they do, people, and everybody loves everybody, everybody gets along, and it just makes my heart so happy. Back to career. One moment I loved dancing with Fred Astaire. Oh my gosh. I was so excited. I was doing a Perry Mason show, and I got a call from my agent, and he said, hi, Joyce. How'd you like to do a show with Fred Astaire? And I said, hi, Ron. Listen, I got to get back to the set. Why are you calling? He said, would you like to do a show with Fred Astaire? I said, Ron, come on, I don't have time for this. I got to get back. They're waiting for me. Oh, you don't want to do the show with Fred? I said, wait a minute, are you serious? He said, yes, and you get to dance with him. And I said, I mean, my mother used to take me when I come to New York. We'd go to every RKO theater and watch every single Fred Astaire movie. And I literally would have dreams about being in a ballroom, being lifted in the air in a chiffon dress, and dancing with Fred Astaire. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. And he said, oh, yes, that's what's happening. And I was thrilled out of my mind. So the first day of rehearsal, it was an Alcoa Presents called Mr. Lucifer. And he played the devil. And he was trying to tempt me. Could he ever? And then Elizabeth Montgomery, who'd been married to Bill Asher, well, at the time was, she played the sultry secretary to the devil, trying to get with my husband. and Fred Astaire, they're trying to tempt us because we're the perfect couple. It's really a funny show. But I arrived at the studio where we were going to rehearse. I didn't want to be too early, that would seem too eager. I didn't want to be late, that wouldn't be professional. I wanted to arrive right on time, so I got there 45 minutes early. And I thought, oh, I can't go in there. So I went in the ladies' room and sat on the throne there. And I kept looking at my watch, and I was so nervous. And I went into the rehearsal. There was a door to the rehearsal hall right exactly at the time I was supposed to be there. And I remember opening the door just a little crack, and I saw him. And there he was, sort of leaning against the piano, and he had on white pants, and he had a tie as a belt, and his a pink shirt with the sleeves rolled up. And I just opened. What do I do? I can't go in there. It's Fred Astaire, you know. And then I peeped open again like this, and he went. And then I found out we didn't get to do the waltz and my beautiful chiffon dress and being lifted in the air and being Ginger Rogers or any of that. It was the twist. And he said, before the scene started, he said, Miss Bulifant. I said, oh, Mr. Astaire, please call me Joyce. And he said, I don't know how to do the twist. He said, would you teach me? I said, wait a minute. You want me to teach you a dance? And he said, yes, I have no idea how to do it. Let's go behind the flat and do it. So I taught Fred Astaire to do the twist. And boy, did he do it. Oh, my God. I mean, nobody ever, he just, oh, wow. He couldn't walk across a room without dancing. He was so sweet. Oh, that's my phone. Maybe I got the house. I'm sorry. How rude. Yes, who is it? Anyone important? Fred Astaire calling? Anyway, that was a thrilling moment. And the other show I love doing was The Unsinkable Molly Brown, because I'm dyslexic. So when I got to sing the song, I'm going to learn to read and write, I had a lot of fervor in that. It was so much fun. I did it for during the whole summer in Kansas City. And I had John, my youngest son, played a newspaper boy. They wrote that in for him. And then my daughter, Mary, played a little French maid. And we just had the best summer. But a horrible thing happened. I got hit in boarding school. I loved playing field hockey. And I got hit in the mouth with a hockey stick. And the tooth got chipped and black and everything, so they had to replace it with a cap. And then when Jimmy and I were in Tobago, he was doing Swiss Family Robinson, and I was pregnant like this with this cap. No, I didn't have a cap at that time. And we were running towards each other on the beach at the end of the day. The sun was setting, and I knew we were running this romantic thing. We're going to embrace, and it was going to be great. But instead, he went bam into me, and the rest of the tooth came out. So I was with no tooth, pregnant on an island in Tobago. I was adorable. Anyway, during The Unsinkable Molly Brown, I had a capped tooth here, and there was a fighting scene with the brothers, and over on this side of the stage, the father was singing this lovely ballad about losing his daughter, and we were kind of frozen in this fight position over here. And all of a sudden, I felt something on my tongue. And it was my front tooth had fallen out of my tongue. And I said to one of the boys playing my brother, my front tooth fell out. He said, give it to me. I said, not on your life, And then I tried to put it back in. I did. I got back in, but I had him backwards. And I could tell it wasn't quite right. And finally, I got that. So I had to be careful because it was dinner theater, and people were eating this close. And there's a song where I said, do, and I think, and you think. And I thought, if I go, and I think it's going to just shoot in somebody's plate. So I was singing the rest of the show, and I think. Luckily, one of the cast had been studying dentistry and happened to have glue or whatever you use, and was able to put it back. Oh my gosh, it's terrible. That was an awful moment. I love doing theater. I did a Broadway play, the lead in a Broadway play, the Paisley Convertible. And you know who my leading man was? Sam Waterston. He was so good. And he played, it was a comedy. I don't know why I was in it. And he was just so good because he played the truth in the character, and it was wonderful to act with. But he wasn't getting, in previews, he wasn't getting the laughs that the producer thought he should be getting. So one day after, am I going too long? Will you tell me when I get there? You have 10 minutes. Oh my goodness, I can tell you really a lot of deep secrets. Anyway, I was called afterwards to meet with the producer and the director, and I thought, oh boy, this was in the 5-day period in previews when they can replace you. And I thought, they're going to replace me. I know they're going to replace me. And I sat there, and Mike Ellis, the producer, said, Joyce, we have something to tell you, and you may not tell Sam or anyone. And I said, what is it? And he said, we have to replace Sam. I said, no, oh no. And he said, but you may not tell him. He's got to do 2 more shows. And if he knows he's being replaced, it's going to be hard for him to do the shows. You may not do this, but we need you here tomorrow morning to read with some actors we're bringing in from the coast. It was a horrible burden. And I showed up at the theater, of course, at 10, and Bill Bixby was their choice. And Bill was very slick, and got the laughs, but Sam played from the inside out, the truth, which I think in comedy it's very important to play the truth. That's what makes it funny. When you're commenting on something in a play, and instead of playing the truth of it, it's just not so funny. But he was good and slick, but I was blocking with him, new blocking, and then at night going on with Sam and doing old blocking. So I'd sort of get in the middle, it was like this. But then the next night before the performance, I heard the high heel shoes coming up, but Sam's dressing room was next to mine. And I heard this click, click, click up the stairs. I heard the dressing room door open to Sam's room, and I heard blah, 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 screaming. And all of a sudden, Sam came in, and he opened my door, and he said, how dare you? How dare you not tell me? And I didn't know what to say, and I've written letters to him. I've done everything to say that I was sorry, and I didn't know what to do, but I had been brought up in the theater where the director's word is God. You don't listen to anybody else except the director, because a lot of people will try to tell you how to play a scene, what to do. But I think that's one of the worst moments I ever had in the business, because I had hurt somebody. Were you talking about hurting somebody? Who was talking about that? You were talking about hurting somebody. And to me, I think that's just when you want to make people happy and you want to make them feel good, and you've inadvertently have done something that hurts them, it's devastating to me, devastating. And that was, and obviously always will be and has been, and I've never been able to, I keep thinking, my daughter, my stepdaughter, Rebecca, directs Gracie and Frank. And I keep saying, Rebecca, please give him this note. Tell him this, do that. And I even wrote about it. I think I wrote about it in my book. I've got to read my book again. It's been a while. There's a lot I left out, too. I could fill in the blanks for you. And I think the thing I'm most proud about, besides finally picking the most wonderful husband in the world for my children, who everybody in the family, including all the stepchildren, the United Nations, they all called Roger Pappy. And sadly, he passed away a year and a half ago. And that's a devastating feeling. And but I want to write about that because it was a very spiritual transition for him, and I got to help him through it. And I thought it might help me and might help others to learn about what I learned, and Roger learned about how to do the process in a wonderful way. But it's a horrible loss. Can't even go there yet. Anyway, the thing that has kept me going through all of this as a little child has been faith and attitude, and that's what it does for me. And I hope that anything that I've learned will help others. And Roger and I did finally get married in 2002, and we had a party celebrating our 10th wedding anniversary, and the cake said 50 years of love and 10 years of marriage. Do you have any questions for me?
Tell us about Airplane.
Oh, Airplane. Well, when I read that script, I said, you got to be kidding. I'm not going to do this. This is ridiculous. People, instead of baggage, are coming down the baggage claim. It doesn't make any sense. Now, the plane, instead of just stopping here, kept going until it plowed right into it wasn't funny. And we were all on the set. My husband, Bill Asher, number 3. Bill said, you're an actress, you act. And I said, okay, I'll do it. I mean, it's just so stupid. And there we are on the airplane. My favorite moment is everyone into crash positions. But we're walking up and down the aisle of the plane, this mock plane, saying, do you think this is funny? We're going, you think it's funny? And then Howard Koch's wife, Ruth, she didn't like it at all, the script. And we went to this first screening at Paramount. And Ruth and I were sitting next to each other, and we go, oh, this is going to be a disaster. So yes, and Howard was all excited about it. And the curtain opened. And from that point on, people were falling out of their chairs laughing. It's just one of those crazy, fluky kind of movies that really worked. And then everybody started doing parodies. So, and you had a question. I'm sorry, I am looking for a 6th husband, but you're a little young.
Hi, my question is that you said with Roger Perry you really learned the process. What process was that? You had the process down. What process? Was that the process of marriage or?
Oh, the dying process. What is that what you're talking about?
Well, you just said process, and I just wondered what were you referring to, that's all.
I think his dying, the transition that he went through, knowing that he was dying and that he wanted me to help him through it. And the minister from the church and another, Dr. Joe Hopper from the Center for Spiritual Learning, I asked Roger, would you like for them to come talk to you? And he did want them to come talk to him. And a lot of it is about wrapping up everything in your life so that if you leave things undone, unsaid, and not taken care of, then the process, that transition is much harder. But if it's all wrapped up, it's much easier. And Roger had been married for 25 years to Joanne Worley, and I said, honey, do you want Joanne to come out? Do you need to say anything to her? And he said, what? Why? I said, okay, forget it. But that's what I mean, that process. And he did say, it's a little hard to talk about. I'm going to write about it. But he did say he had a confession. And his daughter was there, too. And she said, should I leave the room? And And Roger said, no. And the minister said, no. And he said, and I thought, what confession? This was the dearest man. And he said, when we were in Israel. And I went, what? We were glued at the hip. He couldn't go off to some brothel or something in Israel. What could he be Was he going to say he really doesn't believe in a divine spirit, or what could he possibly say? He said, I wrote a prayer and I put it in the Wailing Wall, and the prayer was, dear God, please let me die before Joyce. And he said it's happening. And I'm kind of pissed off with him, if you want to know the truth, because he must have known how difficult it would be, you know. But he said to me one night when I finally really broke down, I didn't want to break down and cry, but I did one night. I said, I'm going to miss you so much. He said, you're going to be okay. You have a great support group, and that's one of them. Any more questions? From comedy to death. Yes, ma'am.
Where did you actually get your training other than backstage?
Oh, well, backstage was the best training because it's hands-on. But then because I was such a bad student, I did great my senior year. I graduated with honors. I mean, what? My parents were just, what? But I had Shakespeare that year, art, chorus, and so I did very well in those. But I didn't want to go to college. I was lucky enough to go to this great prep school in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, called Soulbury. It was a small school, and they helped me through the dyslexia because the classes were small, and they had a drama club. And when I lecture about dyslexia all over the United States, and I always say, teach these children theater, teach them drama, because, you know, when you learn, it's a multi-sensory approach to learning to do a play, because black letters on a white page never meant anything to me. But when you brought them to life, which you do in a play, then the meaning is what helped me learn to read. And was so important. But the thing that I'm most proud of, I was going to talk about that. Roger and I was the president of Rotary. Ta-da! I missed a meeting. That's how it happened. And I wanted to have a project, and we started a center. I got the county and the police and the social workers and the lawyers, everybody in the whole town of Glenwood Springs, Colorado. We built a cottage for abused children where everybody would come to them, the forensic interviewers, the social service, the sane nurse to do the exams, and the police and the lawyers, and we have a dog, and the dog is right there with the children when they're being interviewed. And then when they go to court, the dog is allowed to go on the witness stand with them. And I think that, besides my children, that is my greatest accomplishment. I think that I'm most proud of. No, I really am not. That took 6 years of Roger and me doing every 2-character musical play we could think of, till finally we ran out of one. So we wrote a whole big musical called The Grand Old Dame about this great hotel in Colorado, and we put all the community into it at Christmas. It was just magical. Then we did it in Palm Desert a few years ago. It was all original. Roger wrote the music, I wrote the book and the lyrics. And we did it just in a summer together. And he only got angry with me once. Yeah. Are there any other questions?
Answer her question. You went to the Academy.
Oh, the American Academy. I do go off. That is called attention deficit and everything else. The American Academy of Dramatic Arts, where Carol's granddaughter is going now and a grandson is going. Have you got the hook?
My late husband went there too.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Oh, my gosh.
You may have been there at the same time. We'll
I
talk
wonder.
about it.
Yes.
He knew Tom Poston and-
1920s.
No, Joyce. Good
Almost.
try. You're such an angel. Thank you for showing up here and entertaining us. And you're such a beautiful, bubbly infectious, wonderful personality.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's give her a big hand. Thank you, everybody.